A lonely millionaire, Elliot Grayson, was known for his towering skyscrapers and immense wealth, but not for his warmth or kindness. One fateful day on a quiet, windswept bridge, his life took a turn he never expected. A little girl saved him in more ways than one, but what she asked for in return left him speechless. He thought his fortune could repay her, but her simple request brought him to tears and forced him to confront a life of loneliness and greed. What did she ask for? And how did it change his life forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from. Welcome to Graceful Storyteller. The bridge stretched over the river, grey and quiet under the winter sky. Cars zoomed by, but Elliot Grayson barely noticed. He stood at the edge, his fancy coat whipping in the icy wind. Below, the freezing river rushed like a wild storm, just as chaotic as his thoughts. Elliot was super rich. His name was on skyscrapers, his bank accounts were huge, and his home was filled with shiny, expensive things. But inside he felt empty. He had no friends, no family he talked to, and no one to share his success with. It was like being trapped in a golden cage. Today, Elliot felt like he couldn't take it anymore. He leaned on the bridge's railing, staring down at the water. Is this all there is, he wondered. What's the point of having everything if I feel like I have nothing? The river below seemed to call him, promising an end to his pain. Hey, mister. What are you doing? A small voice called out. Elliot turned around, startled. A little girl stood a few feet away. She had messy brown hair, a pink scarf that looked way too big for her, and curious hazel eyes. She looked so small and out of place on the big, cold bridge. Go away, Elliot muttered, looking back at the river. You look sad, she said, stepping closer. Are you going to jump? Elliot froze. He didn't expect such a bold question from a kid. That's none of your business, he said, his voice shaky. The girl didn't move. Instead, she pulled a lollipop out of her pocket. It was a little cracked, but she held it out to him with a smile. Here. My mum says candy makes everything better. Elliot stared at the lollipop. It was such a simple thing, but it felt like the kindest gift in the world. Slowly, he took it. Thank you, he said softly. What's your name, she asked. Elliot, he replied. What's yours? Sophie, she said proudly. Don't be sad. Elliot. My mum says things always get better. Before Elliot could reply, a woman's voice called out, Sophie. There you are. A young woman, Sophie's mum, ran up to them. Out of breath. Oh, thank goodness, she said, pulling Sophie close. Thank you for keeping an eye on her, she told Elliot with a nervous smile. She's a brave little girl, Elliot said, managing a small smile of his own. She's all I've got, the woman said, her voice soft. We've had a tough time, but Sophie keeps me going. Elliot nodded as the woman and her daughter walked away. He stood there for a long time, holding the lollipop and feeling something warm in his chest. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about Sophie's words and her simple, kind gesture. In the days that followed, Elliot found himself going to the park near the bridge, hoping to see Sophie again. After a few weeks, he did. Sophie was thrilled to see him and introduced him to her mum, Claire. Elliot learned that Claire was a single mum who worked 2 jobs to take care of Sophie. Life was hard for them, but they were happy in a way Elliot had never been. One day, as Sophie played on the swings, Elliot sat with Claire on a park bench. She really has a way of seeing the good in everything, Elliot said, watching Sophie laugh. Claire smiled warmly. She's been through a lot for someone so young. We lost her dad a few years ago, and it's been just the 2 of us since. But she's always been my little sunshine. Hearing this, Elliot felt a pang of guilt for his own self-pity. Here was a little girl who had faced more hardship than he ever had, yet she radiated joy and kindness. It made him question everything about his own life. Elliot started helping them out. He bought groceries, fixed Claire's car, and even secretly paid off some of her bills. Claire was hesitant at first, but she eventually realized Elliot just wanted to help. Spending time with Sophie and Claire made Elliot feel alive again. Sophie's cheerful, innocent view of the world made him see things differently. One day, Sophie invited Elliot to her school's holiday concert. He didn't want to go at first, but he eventually said yes. Sitting in the crowded auditorium, Elliot watched Sophie sing her heart out. The laughter and joy of the families around him felt so different from his cold, lonely penthouse. For the first time, he wondered what it would be like to belong to a family. As weeks turned into months, Elliot found himself changing. He started volunteering at local shelters, something he never imagined doing before. One evening, as he served soup to a line of people, Sophie came to visit with Claire. She tugged on his sleeve. "You're like a superhero now," she said with a grin. Elliot laughed. "A superhero, ho? I think you're the real hero, Sophie." Sophie beamed, and Elliot realized how much lighter his heart felt. It wasn't the money or the success that mattered, it was these connections, these moments of real human kindness. One snowy evening, Sophie asked him, "Elliot, why are you always alone?" The question hit him hard. He looked down at her and said, "I guess I forgot how to be with people." Sophie smiled and said, "You can be with us." Elliot's eyes filled with tears. In that moment, he realized he didn't need more money or power. He needed connection. He nodded and hugged Sophie tightly. That night, he decided to change his life. Elliot began reconnecting with his family and fixing broken relationships. He reached out to his estranged sister, whom he hadn't spoken to in years. Over a cup of coffee, he apologized for pushing her away. She forgave him, and they started rebuilding their bond. He also used his money to help others, starting with a park dedicated to Sophie. He hired local artists to design a playground that would bring joy to children. He also funded schools, created scholarships, and hosted events for kids who didn't have much. At the park's grand opening, Sophie handed Elliot another lollipop. "You're not sad anymore, right?" she asked. Elliot smiled, tears running down his face. "Not anymore, Sophie. Thanks to you." As kids played and families laughed in the park, Elliot felt truly happy for the first time in years. Sophie ran to him, and he picked her up, laughing. For the first time, Elliot felt like his life was full of meaning. Watching Sophie's joy in the life he had helped create, he knew he had finally found his purpose. Even small acts of kindness can change someone's life. Never underestimate the power of caring for others. Also, have you ever met someone who changed your life with a small act of kindness? Share your story in the comments.